In 2017, I had a dream that Dwayne The Rock Johnson wanted to date me, and I turned him down because I couldn't be the fat lesbian dating The Rock. I was like, oh no, this doesn't go well for me because he was in the news for being feminist and open to all bodies. Like he was in the news for all this great stuff. And I was like, oh, this goes well for you. This does not go well for me. Like you get to be the good guy. I'm the fat whale lesbian dating The Rock. Like, no. And in the dream, he said, but we're in love. Like, doesn't love conquer all? I was like, no, no. Love doesn't conquer all when you're part of a marginalized community. Like, love only conquers all if you have the privilege. And I remember waking up from that thinking, oh, that would be a really good book. But I'm working on this really intense book about grief and I need to finish it. It's due to my agent. Like, I already told them it was coming. It's a beautiful book about grief. And like, I need to share these deep, dark feelings to be a real author. And I was living in Mexico City at the time, and I, was sitting down. I like had a 6 week period, and this book had to be to my agent by the end of the 6 weeks. And every time I sat down to write Homebound, is what I was calling it. Every time I sat down to write it, all I wanted to do was write about how The Rock wanted to date me. All I wanted to do was write about how The Rock wanted to date me. And I was so sad in my grief. I was only like 5 years out of my brother dying. And I was just like reopening the wound. And, that is a beautiful, beautiful story. It will someday see the light of day. But instead, it became the movie that she's making in the rom-com Because Fat Girl. And I think I had this idea that if I was going to write about grief, it had to be in a serious way. And I think that actually switching and writing about grief in a light-hearted way, not necessarily lighthearted, like there are some deep, hard parts of this book. In fact, one of the things I get a lot is like, this is pretty intense for a romance. But by putting it in this idea of like they're making a movie together and there's beautiful costumes and they're rich and famous and there's this beautiful home and there's food and in all these like easy to digest ways, we can actually come to our grief differently. We can come to talking about, what does it mean to identify? When we went to look for comps for Because Fat Girl, my publisher and I couldn't find anything like it other than Chasing Amy by Kevin Smith. There were no books out there where a queer person who has only dated women has to deal with I might be more bisexual than I realized, and I'm dating men now. I'm like falling for a man, and I don't know what that means. And that is an experience that I know at least, when I made a list, I could name 75 people in my life who've had that experience. Granted, I know a lot of queer people, right? But like it is an experience that's out there that we don't have any books on. And I would love it if anybody out there knows a book, please send me. I'm asking everybody, like send me books about this topic. But the only thing any of us have been able to find is Chasing Amy, and it's from the male perspective. It's from Ben Affleck's perspective, right? And so, what does it mean to look at these hard topics of identity, of community, of following your dreams when the world is kind of like setting up barriers between you and them, of fatness, of grief, all within this like shiny, fun Cinderella story set in Hollywood? And so that's what I was trying to do there is look at in the same way that we had to have like coloring book to deal with body image, we had to have the rom-com, the knowing there's going to be a happily ever after at the end, the glitz and glam of Hollywood, to be able to digest all of the things that this person is dealing with. And everybody asked me like, well, why'd you make her have so much? And I was like, oh, I just kind of wrote my life and then fictionalized it in Hollywood. So like it is a reflection of the multidimensional humans that I am and the people are around me. I always think about how in film school, I wanted to be a director, a writer director, and I was highly encouraged to give up that whole directing thing. Like, and it was interesting to me because my guy friends were highly encouraged to keep going for the director dream. And I look back at every single one of my female colleagues, and we were all pushed into get into producing, into being an AD, assistant director, into being a screenwriter. I was told, oh, don't go to Hollywood. I mean, somebody literally was like, you're not going to make it in Hollywood as a fat lesbian. Like, it's going to be miserable. You should go be a novelist instead. Like, you don't have to worry about that in the novel world. And I took that to heart a little too much as a 20-year-old. And don't get me wrong, I love being a novelist, I love being a writer, but I gave up on going to Hollywood because every single person in my life told me I'd be miserable in Hollywood as a fat lesbian. And and I wonder, because Fat Girl is looking at like what it would have been like if I hadn't believed them, if I had like still gone for that dream instead of going like it's my same life, but if I'd gone for that dream. And then I've worked with multiple celebrities. One of the ones I can be open about is I worked for 2 years as the right-hand content creator for Tony Robbins at his events. So I traveled all over the world with Tony Robbins, and I coached the speakers on his stage to tell their story, pulled their stories out of them and helped them tell it on stage. It was a beautiful experience. And I witnessed so much fat phobia, and I witnessed so much homophobia, and I witnessed so much misogyny. I was very lucky that in my direct world, like Tony Robbins is surrounded by queer people and women, and it was like actually a really great place to be with him. And I always try to say that, like, he was great to me always. But the people adjacent that I met a lot, like, there was a difference in how they treated me. Some of the people who'd come into our world, I could tell they treated me very differently. Even though I talk about this time, we were sitting at a table and they were going around the table asking everybody everything, and I was the only woman in the room, and they skipped me. And they asked these like men, these boys that were in the room before me. And it's so funny because the thing they needed was somebody who had a contact in agriculture. And I'm a farmer's daughter. And the thing they needed, they skipped the one person in the room who could have given it to them. But I was in this room of billionaire men who were just like, nobody asked me. And I just faced so much misogyny. And the more of somebody was a celebrity, the more I noticed that they were like either really fucking cool or really insecure, and it was coming out as prejudice. And so I leaned into what it would be like to like find the people in Hollywood that were really friggin' cool, that were like aware, similar to how Tony Robbins treated me really well. Like, what about these celebrities that have nothing to prove? What would they do? What would they do with their power? And I explored that in Because Fat Girl. And then like had, a couple, like, I never use anybody's name, but absolutely the various different villains in this book, the various different assholes in this book are absolutely based on people that I met through my career, both in film writing and working with other celebrities.